My hand still smelled like stale fryer grease when the notification lit up my screen. 11:51 p.m. It was a photo. My stepmother, Stephanie, toasting with a crystal flute inside a luxury RV that cost more than I would earn in 10 years. The text underneath was surgical. Just a reminder, sweetie. Don't bother coming for Christmas. This trip is for family only. We don't have room for charity cases. I didn't even have time to blink before the second message arrived from my father, Jeffrey. We are changing the locks while we are gone. Find somewhere else. I stood on the cold pavement, staring at the phone. My eyes stayed dry. Crying is a luxury for people who have a home to go back to. Instead, I just realized that for 23 years, I hadn't been a daughter. I had been a tenant they finally decided to evict. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from right now. Have you ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own home? I want to hear your story. I sat on the concrete curb outside the diner, the damp cold seeping through my thin uniform trousers. My phone sat on my knee like a loaded weapon. I didn't reply to the texts. There was no point in negotiating with terrorists, even if they shared your last name. I was calculating how many shifts I would need to pick up just to afford a motel room for the night when the screen lit up again. It wasn't my father, Jeffrey. It wasn't my stepmother. It was an unknown number with a local area code. I answered, expecting a bill collector. Instead, a voice cut through the static, sharp and precise as a diamond cutter. Is this Alyssa Vance? I cleared my throat, trying to sound like I wasn't currently homeless. Speaking. This is Patricia Vance. I am the executor of the estate for Evelyn Vance. I believe she was your grandmother. The world stopped spinning for a second. My family had told me Grandma Evelyn died penniless in a state-run facility 3 years ago. They said she was senile and didn't remember us. I held the phone tighter. My grandmother passed away? I asked, the words feeling heavy and foreign. Patricia paused. She passed away yesterday morning, Alyssa. And contrary to whatever you might have been told, she was very much in her right mind. She left specific instructions that you were to be contacted immediately. I stared at a grease stain on the pavement. Why? I asked. Why me? Because, Patricia said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. You are the sole beneficiary. She left you everything, the house, the investment portfolio, the liquid assets. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, hysterical and jagged. Assets? My grandmother lived on a pension. Or so I thought. Patricia continued, oblivious to my internal vertigo. The total valuation of the estate, after taxes and fees, is $2,520,000. $2,520,000. The number didn't make sense. It was too big to fit inside my head. It was a lottery number. It was a mistake. But Patricia Vance didn't sound like a woman who made mistakes. She sounded like a woman who buried bodies legally. I need you to come to my office, she said. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at the photo Stephanie had sent me 5 minutes ago. The champagne, the RV, the smiles of people who thought they had won. They didn't know. They had no idea Grandma was dead, or if they did, they assumed there was nothing to inherit. Or worse, they knew exactly how much there was, and they thought they were getting it. I stood up. My knees popped. I wiped the fryer grease off my forehead with the back of my hand. I didn't scream. Hysteria is for people who have a safety net. I had a full tank of gas and a folder of evidence. I'm not coming to your office, Patricia, I said. I'm going to pay my family a visit. I walked to my car, a rust bucket sedan that sounded like a lawnmower when it started. I threw my apron into the passenger seat. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. I looked poor. I looked like the charity case they always said I was. But as I shifted into gear and pointed the car toward their gated community, I realized something. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the landlord, and rent was due. The drive to the gated community usually took 40 minutes. I made it in 30. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my mind was traveling back in time, ripping through 23 years of carefully constructed fiction. For as long as I could remember, Jeffrey and Stephanie had a favorite story. They loved to tell it at dinner parties. Usually after the second bottle of wine, they would look at me with pitying smiles and tell their friends how they took me in. The distant cousin, the orphan, the charity case. We just could not let her go into the system, Stephanie would say, clutching her pearls. We had to make room in our hearts. Room in their hearts, maybe. But never in their home. Tyler and Samantha had suites with en-suite bathrooms and walk-in closets. I slept on a pull-out couch in the den until I was 12, and then they moved me into the unfinished basement. They called it my studio. I called it what it was, a storage unit for the unwanted child. But the physical space was not the worst part. The worst part was the debt. They installed an invisible meter in my chest the day I learned to speak. Every meal I ate, every pair of shoes I wore, every breath I took in their house was tallied on a ledger I could never pay off. They made sure I felt the weight of my existence. You should be grateful, Jeffrey would say when I asked for school supplies. Most people would not do this for a stranger, so I paid. I started scrubbing their floors when I was 8. I did the laundry, the landscaping, and the cooking. When I turned 16, they told me that since I was of working age, I needed to contribute to the household expenses. I got a job at the diner. I handed over 70% of my paycheck every Friday. They called it rent. They called it reimbursement for their generosity. I believed them. That is the insidious thing about the invisible debt. You believe that your survival is a favor, not a right. You believe that you are a burden that must be worked off. I spent my entire youth apologizing for taking up space, trying to shrink myself down so I would cost them less. I looked at the passenger seat where the folder Patricia gave me lay open. The documents inside told a different story. They told a story of a trust fund established by my biological mother. A trust fund that was supposed to cover my education, my housing, my life. A trust fund that Jeffrey had control over as my guardian. The realization hit me harder than the smell of the marshlands rushing past my window. They had not been supporting me. I had been supporting them, my rent payments, my free labor, my silence. It wasn't reimbursement, it was profit. The new cars, the renovations, the private schools for Tyler and Samantha, it was all funded by the money that was supposed to keep me safe. I wasn't the charity case. I was the golden goose, and they had been plucking my feathers for 2 decades while telling me I should be thankful for the cold. I pulled up to the security gate. The guard, a man named Earl who had seen me walk in from the bus stop 1,000 times, looked surprised to see me in a car. He started to wave me down, probably to tell me that deliveries went to the back entrance, but I didn't stop. I flashed my ID, the one that matched the name on the deed of the house inside, even if he didn't know it yet. I drove through the gates. The manicured lawns and fountains blurred past. I wasn't driving to my parents' house anymore. I was driving to a crime scene, and I was the only witness who mattered. I parked the sedan 3 houses down. The gated community rules said no street parking. But I figured the homeowners association would have bigger problems to deal with soon than my rust bucket blocking a fire hydrant. I walked toward the house, my house. Technically, the deed was in my name now, or at least in the trust that I controlled, but looking at it, with its manicured hedges and the fountain that probably cost more than my college tuition would have, it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a stage set, and the play was in full swing. They were in the front yard. A Bon Voyage banner was strung between 2 palm trees. The luxury RV, a beast of chrome and cream leather that looked like a land yacht, was parked in the driveway. The slide-outs extended to show off the interior. Neighbors were milling around with plastic cups of wine, admiring the sheer excess of it all. I stood behind a large oleander bush near the perimeter fence, watching. It was fascinating, in a clinical way, like watching bacteria multiply under a microscope. Stephanie was holding court by the RV steps. I could hear her voice, shrill and excited, carrying over the hum of the generator. Oh, We just decided it was time to treat ourselves, she was saying to Mrs. Gable from next door. Jeffrey has worked so hard. And honestly, dealing with his mother's estate was such a nightmare. We deserve a break. Is the estate settled then? Mrs. Gable asked. Practically, Jeffrey chimed in, slapping a neighbor on the back. He looked flushed, victorious. The lawyers are just dotting the I's. Mom was tight-fisted. God rest her soul. But she couldn't take it with her. About time that money did some good for the living. Tyler was perched on the hood of his car, scrolling on his phone. He turned the screen to show Samantha. Bro, look at this Porsche. If I put $10,000 down, the monthly is nothing. I am getting it next week. I am getting the pool put in while we are gone, Samantha replied, bored. Mom said I could design the tile work. I listened to them spend money they did not have. I listened to them carve up a carcass that wasn't dead, but simply stolen. It is a specific kind of insanity, I realized. I used to think they were just bad with money. But this was deeper. It was the narcissist's math. To them, the inheritance wasn't a possibility or a legal process. It was a right. In their minds, the money was already theirs the moment they wanted it. They didn't see risk. They didn't see the reality of probate or wills. They only saw what they felt entitled to. They viewed potential assets as liquid cash, and they spent it to fill the hole where their character should be. They weren't grieving Grandma Evelyn. They were celebrating her death because it was the payout date of a policy they thought they owned. They were drinking champagne on the grave of the woman who saved me, and they were laughing about it. I smoothed the front of my apron, then remembered I wasn't wearing it. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but I felt armored. I touched the folder in my bag. The forensic accounting. The truth. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the perfect lawn. It was the golden hour, that time photographers love. Perfect lighting for a tragedy. I stepped out from behind the oleander bush. I didn't sneak. I walked right up the center of the driveway, the gravel crunching loudly under my cheap sneakers. 2 hours earlier, I had sat across from Patricia Vance in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and expensive leather. The city skyline was a gray smear through the glass behind her, but my focus was entirely on the document she slid across the mahogany table. It was a photocopy of the paper Stephanie had kept framed in her office for years. The one she would point to whenever I misbehaved, tapping the glass with a manicured nail. See this? This is the adoption decree. This is the legal proof of our generosity. Patricia placed a second document next to it, the original. They altered the photocopy. Alyssa, Patricia said, her voice devoid of pity. She was all business, a shark in a silk blouse. This is the actual court filing from 19 years ago. It is not an adoption decree. It is a guardianship order. I looked at the text. Temporary guardianship of minor estate. Your biological mother left you a trust, Patricia explained, tapping a paragraph. Jeffrey was appointed as the trustee. His only legal obligation was to manage the funds for your benefit until you turned 18. At that point, the trust should have transferred entirely to your control. I am 23, I said. The math was simple, but the implication was nauseating. Exactly. Patricia said. She opened a second folder, which begs the question, how have they been accessing the funds for the last 5 years? She fanned out a series of withdrawal slips. They were dated every month for the last 60 months. At the bottom of each one was a signature. Alyssa Vance. I stared at the ink. It was a good forgery. A little too loopy on the A, but close enough to pass a teller who didn't care to look too closely. This isn't just bad parenting, Patricia said, leaning back. This is felony fraud. It is forgery. It is grand larceny. They didn't keep you in the basement because they were ashamed of you. They kept you there because if you left, the money stopped flowing. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the clicking of a lock finally turning. The confusion of my childhood, the mixed messages, the coldness, the insistence that I was a burden, all of it vanished. It wasn't personal. It was business. I was an asset they had to depreciate to keep on the books. What do you want to do? Patricia asked. We can file a police report immediately. We can freeze the accounts. I looked at the forged signatures. I looked at the withdrawals, thousands of dollars a month, ostensibly for my care, while I was paying them rent to sleep in a basement. I don't want to just freeze them, I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears, harder. I want a forensic accounting. I want to know every cent they spent, every latte, every tank of gas, every payment on that RV. I want an itemized invoice of their theft. Patricia smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. I have the preliminary numbers already. It's substantial. Good. I stood up. Print it out. I'm going to deliver the audit myself. I looked at her. Do you have time for a field trip, Patricia? I think my family is having a party. Patricia stood up and grabbed her briefcase. I wouldn't miss it for the world. That was the moment the victim died. The woman walking out of that office wasn't a daughter seeking approval. She was a CEO conducting a hostile takeover. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, loud as gunshots in the quiet lull of the evening. Conversation died out in ripples. First, the neighbors nearest the driveway, then the ones by the cooler, and finally, my family by the RV. Even the playlist seemed to sense the mood, fading into an awkward silence between tracks. Stephanie was the first to react. She descended the RV steps, her face twisting from hostess warmth to the familiar sneer she reserved for me. She marched across the lawn, her heels sinking into the grass, trying to intercept me before I reached the main group. I thought I was clear, she hissed, her voice low but carrying in the stillness. I sent you a text. We don't have room for charity cases tonight, Alyssa. Go home. I am home, I said. My voice was steady, projecting just enough for Mrs. Gable and the other neighbors to hear. And I'm not a charity case, Stephanie. I'm the landlord. You're drunk, Jeffrey shouted, striding over with a half-empty glass of wine. Get out of here before I call the police. Actually, a voice cut in from behind me. We've already taken the liberty of contacting the authorities. They should be here shortly. Patricia Vance stepped out from my shadow. The effect was immediate. My family didn't know who she was, but they knew what she represented. She radiated the kind of expensive, lethal authority that makes guilty people sweat. Who is this? Jeffrey demanded, though his confidence was faltering. I am Patricia Vance. I represent the estate of Evelyn Vance, and I am currently representing Alyssa in the matter of the trust established by her mother, Jennifer. The color drained from Jeffrey's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Tyler and Samantha looked between us, confused. They didn't know. They genuinely didn't know. What trust? Tyler asked. She's an orphan. We took her in. That, I said, looking at the neighbors who were now watching with rapt attention, is the lie they told you. And me? Patricia opened her briefcase right there on the driveway. She held up the guardianship order. Alyssa isn't a distant relative you took in out of kindness, Patricia announced, her voice crisp and clear. She is the sole beneficiary of a trust fund left by her biological mother. A trust fund that Jeffrey here was legally obligated to turn over to her 5 years ago. Stephanie let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. This is ridiculous. Some old paperwork. And this, Patricia interrupted, holding up the stack of withdrawal slips, is evidence of 60 separate counts of felony forgery. The silence in the yard was absolute. A bird chirped somewhere, sounding obscenely cheerful. For the last 5 years, Patricia continued, turning to face the neighbors, making sure the audience understood the plot. Someone has been signing Alyssa Vance's name to withdraw funds. Funds that were used to pay for, well, she gestured vaguely at the RV, the landscaping, the designer clothes Tyler was wearing. We raised her, Jeffrey spluttered, his voice cracking. We fed her. Those funds were reimbursement for 18 years of expenses. Reimbursement? I asked. I took a step closer to him. He flinched. I paid you rent. Jeffrey, I scrubbed your floors. I lived in your basement. You charged me for my existence while you were robbing my savings account. It's a misunderstanding, Stephanie pleaded, looking around at the neighbors, her eyes desperate. "We can explain. It's a family matter." "No," I said coldly. "It was a family matter when you lied to me about who I was. Now? Now, it's a criminal matter." The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The trap had snapped shut. They weren't just bad parents anymore. In the eyes of their friends, their neighbors, and the law, they were thieves. And I was the evidence they couldn't hide in the basement anymore. 2 police cruisers pulled up to the curb, their lights cutting through the twilight like strobes at a disaster site. But the officers didn't approach immediately. They stood by their cars, conferring with the security guard Earl, giving Patricia the space to finish her opening statement. $240,000, Patricia read from the forensic audit, her voice projecting clearly to Mrs. Gable and the silent crowd of neighbors. That is the total amount withdrawn via forged checks over the last 5 years. It nearly drained the liquid assets of the trust. Jeffrey looked like he was about to vomit. "It was for the family," he whispered, his bluster evaporating. "And now for the rest of the estate." Patricia continued, pulling a heavy document from her bag, Evelyn Vance's last will and testament, executed 3 days before she passed, while in full possession of her faculties. Stephanie's head snapped up. She didn't have anything. She was in a state home. She was in a private facility paid for by her own dividends. Patricia corrected. She lived simply so she could leave a legacy. And here is how she divided it. She looked at me, then at them. "To my granddaughter, Alyssa Vance, I leave the entirety of my real estate holdings, my investment portfolio, and the remaining cash assets. Total valuation, $2.5 million. Tyler dropped his phone. Samantha made a small, choked sound. "And to my son Jeffrey, his wife Stephanie, and their children." Patricia paused for effect. "I leave the sum of $6,000 each." "$6,000?" Tyler shouted. "That won't even cover the down payment on the Porsche. There is a specific condition attached to these funds," Patricia read on. "This money is designated solely for moving expenses. As the deed to the family home is held by the estate, and the estate now belongs to Alyssa, you have 48 hours to vacate the premises." The reality hit them like a physical blow. They weren't just disinherited, they were homeless. The house they had lived in, the stage they had performed on for decades, was mine. Stephanie looked at the gleaming luxury RV behind her. The vehicle they had just bought on credit, banking on a windfall that didn't exist. We can't," she stammered, her eyes darting between me and the police officers walking up the driveway. "We financed the RV, the payments. If we lose the house, we'll be bankrupt." She looked at me. For the first time in my life, she wasn't looking down at me. She was looking up. "Alyssa, please, we're family. You can't let them arrest your father. You can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go." "You have the RV," I said calmly. "It sleeps 4, doesn't it? We can't afford the gas to get it out of the state." She shrieked. Her dignity gone. "We put everything on credit cards, expecting the inheritance. We don't have cash." I reached into my pocket. I felt the crinkle of the single-dollar bill I had kept from my tips that day. I walked up to Stephanie. She flinched, as if expecting me to hit her, but I didn't raise my hand in violence. "You sent me a text today, Stephanie," I said, my voice soft, lethal. "You said you didn't have room for charity cases. Well, I'm making room for one." I pressed the crumpled dollar bill into her palm. She stared at it, George Washington's face looking back at her with indifference. "Here," I said. "Put this toward the gas. You're going to need it." I turned my back on them, as the officers stepped forward with handcuffs. I didn't watch the arrest. I didn't need to see them being read their rights to know that justice had been served. I walked back to my car, the sound of their pleading fading into the background noise of a life I was leaving behind forever. The fallout was swift and brutal. Jeffrey and Stephanie lost everything. The house, the RV, the status they had so carefully curated, it all evaporated under the heat of forensic scrutiny and criminal charges. They avoided prison time only by pleading guilty and agreeing to full restitution, which meant they would be paying me back for the rest of their lives. Tyler lost his deposit on the Porsche. Samantha never got her pool. They had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, far away from the country clubs and gated communities they thought were their birthright. As for me, I didn't move into the big house. I sold it. I didn't want to live in a monument to my own erasure. I took the money the millions Grandma Evelyn had saved, the restitution from my parents, and I went back to the only place that had ever felt real to me. I drove 2 hours north to a small, dilapidated building on the edge of the arts district. It used to be my biological mother's art studio before Jeffrey sold it off 20 years ago to pay for his first luxury car. It was a wreck now, boarded up and covered in graffiti. But when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I smelled turpentine and old canvas. I smelled home. I bought the building. I restored it, not just as a studio, but as a sanctuary. I launched the Jennifer Vance Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal and financial support for foster kids and young adults who have been exploited by their guardians. We help them reclaim their stolen identities, just like Patricia helped me reclaim mine. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret destroying my family. They ask if I could have just taken the money and walked away quietly, but they don't understand the math. Revenge isn't just about punishment, it's about balance. It's about taking the power back from the people who used it to crush you. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves the moment they decided a child was nothing more than an ATM. I just balanced the ledger. My phone rang yesterday. It was a collect call from the county jail, where Jeffrey was serving a short sentence for contempt of court. I looked at the screen. I thought about the girl who used to scrub floors and apologize for existing. I thought about the invisible debt I had carried for 23 years. I didn't answer. I turned the phone over and picked up my paintbrush. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing their game and start building your own board. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, share this video. You are not alone.